CSGO has just had its third and final major of the year, and for the first time in CSGO history, it was smaller than the one before it. Don't get me wrong, it was a good event. It was professionally hosted and cast. They had even improved on previous majors in some ways. Soundproof booths were a nice touch. And if you went to see it, you'd have had a good time. And it was still more viewed than all previous majors apart from Cologne, which was the largest one ever, so it's not exactly terrible news for Counter-Strike. But it breaks the upward trend. Has CSGO peaked, or are there other factors responsible? I'm going to go through some of the possible reasons. Firstly, the location. I'm sure I wasn't the only one who hadn't heard of Cluj-Napoca until this event. It's quite difficult to get to for the majority of CSGO fans when compared with previous majors, which would explain why the crowd was so much smaller this time. I believe that the location of this tournament was chosen by PGL, which is a company with strong ties to the country. I also think it's interesting to note that Romania doesn't have any strong home teams, and not as much of a following for esports. If anything, this would act as a fairer playing field for the teams that did play. Which brings me on to the second possible reason. There were a lot of upsets early on in the tournament. I'm not sure how important this is. I mean, people enjoy watching their favourite teams play, and for favourites such as TSM, Fnatic and Virtus.pro to drop out before the semis couldn't have helped. But saying that, even the quarter-final figures were down, so I suspect that this reason alone isn't responsible for the viewership drop. And what about the Americans, who make up a large part of CSGO's fanbase? Their time zones mean that the matches are on at difficult times for them, and none of their teams even made it through to the quarter-finals. But saying that, the same was true for Cologne, the most popular major ever. Perhaps matches, particularly ones involving American teams, should be hosted later on in the evenings. Thirdly, the time of the year was terrible. It was Halloween. I had other plans on and couldn't watch a lot of the matches. League of Legends also had a tournament on, which would have stolen some of the less loyal CSGO viewers. Even CSGO had another tournament on at the same time in Paris. Things were against the major from the word go. But not only that, it was also hosted only 2 months later than the previous major. Compare that with the 5 months between the previous two. Is it out of the question to think that the audience has CSGO burnout? Compare this with last year, where there was a whole extra month to wait for the last tournament of 2014. I just didn't feel the same level of hype this year, and in fact found it frustrating that it was hosted at Halloween. And what about burnout from the tournament itself? In previous majors, I know that if I watch too much, then I can get bored before the final. Previous tournaments have been 3 or 4 days long. This major has been the longest yet, spanning 5 days. It could be that viewers had had their fill of the game before the quarterfinals had even started, especially since the decider matches were all best of 3s. This major tried to be fair, but perhaps we got too much of a good thing. And lastly, did it feel like a major to you? Perhaps I've been out of the loop, but I didn't see anywhere near as much hype for this one as with the previous ones. It wasn't really advertised much. Plus, even when we're sat at home watching a stream of the event, the roar of the crowd makes it better. And there just wasn't the same atmosphere this time. But in a way, I think that this tournament will help Counter-Strike. They tried something different, and although it's not been a massive success, it certainly hasn't been a failure. Nobody could have expected the results of these matches, and if anything, these upsets should make it more interesting for the next major. I just hope that the future tournaments learn from this and choose a time and place that better suits the community. I have high hopes for the future of Counter-Strike, and I'm already looking forward to seeing how the next major performs.